1 week from today, the first Big Ten football teams kick off the 2025 season. We've got you covered with the biggest storylines heading into week 1. Could there be some quarterback drama brewing in Eugene? The Oregon Ducks have yet to name a starter. James Crepea joins the show with the latest from Ducks training camp. File this under things you love to see. Some bangers scored in the first week of the women's soccer season. You don't want to miss the Big Ten Plus plays of the week now on Big Ten Today. Hello and welcome into Big Ten Today. So happy to have you here. I'm Kylan Mills. What's that smell? Is that pumpkin spice in the air? Leaves falling off the trees, the temperature actually cooling off. That's right, fall is just around the corner, and so is the kickoff to the Big Ten football season, which means we got to start today's show with some quarterback news. That is today's big story. Purdue football coach Barry Odom has named redshirt sophomore Ryan Brown the program's starting quarterback. Brown started 2 games for the Boilers last year, but then transferred to North Carolina amidst the coaching change. He transferred back to Purdue after spring practices and now will be the starting QB. So there you go. The West Coast schools are gearing up for year 2 in the Big Ten Conference. The Oregon Ducks are chasing the school's second straight Big Ten championship. While USC, Washington, UCLA may have some work to do after going under 500 in their first season in conference action in the Big Ten. Ashley Adamson and Yogi Roth get us up to speed on the outlook in L.A.
Kylan, thank you so much. Yeah, we put the bow on the West Coast edition of the Big Ten Training Camp Tour. 16 stops down, 2 more to go. The season will be here before we know it. And Yogi, I think back to a year ago, and all of the discussion and conversation was around how are these West Coast schools going to fit into the Big Ten way? What is it going to look like? Style of play? Well, Oregon came in. They were the flag bearer, obviously ran the table and won the Big Ten championship. The other teams struggled a little bit in their first year. But when you look at now having a year under their belt in this new league, what do you make of where these new 4 West Coast editions stand?
Well, I'll say what I can't wait to watch them go on the road, because that's where the other 3 really struggled, going on the road when you think about it like that. But the narratives around all 3 of them are similar and dramatically different. Okay, similar. You look at Deshaun Foster and Jedd Fisch, both hired really late. Both lost their coordinator in the offseason. When Steve Belichick goes to North Carolina, Brendan Carroll, he leaves Washington as well. And for UCLA, they move on and bring in Tino Sunseri from Indiana, keeping Akaika Malloy. But majority of that staff at UCLA has totally flipped. They also, I don't even think it's an argument, they got the hottest name in the transfer portal, in Nico Iamaleava. To me, he's a guy not getting anywhere near enough play at that position. And then for Jedd Fisch, he's got his star in Damon Williams. So I think that's kind of a fun storyline in year 2 for those programs that haven't been there in the last week. They just look the part of a Big Ten team much more than they did a year ago. Specifically, I know it's cliche, but the offense and defensive lines, they really have enhanced at so many of those positions. The Ducks, meanwhile, they lose everything. And you're saying, oh, there's no way they could repeat it. After being there, I look at Dante Moore. He has a chance to be the best quarterback in this league. And I know, folks, he hasn't started a game in this league. And when he started for UCLA, he didn't look great. But from what my eyes have said, I think he is one of the most dynamic passers in the country. And he's got a ton of weapons. Oregon, they have the depth. I don't think it's a rebuild thing. It's reload all day long in Eugene.
Yeah, and I think, again, there's so many different, we always laugh because we've been doing this many years together. When you go around to training camp tours, and even in spring or the fall, before you actually play an official snap, it's so easy to just see it and believe.
Oh, yeah.
Because
fall in love with every team.
You fall in love with every team, and you feel like, oh, this team could win the national championship. There's no question. So I think for you've been around so many different stops over the past month. What big picture has stood out to you?
Well, I think that, because the players feel the same way. And I think that's the most beautiful part of training camp. Like, if all the changes that have happened in college football and the staff's growing to over 50 and everybody has a recruiting staff and players getting paid, all the things we know to be true, I think the hope and enthusiasm at Wisconsin is the same at Penn State, is the same at USC as it is in Eugene with the Oregon Ducks. And that's an amazing part of the pageantry of college football. And I think we've seen coaches, also turn a corner of when it was transactional at times, it was like, I got to get my players up to speed X and O wise. Now they're throwing down on connectivity, the relationships, the growth mindset, like the toughness that teams need to acquire in training camp. Like, you need to have like scabs on your knuckles a little bit. We've seen that everywhere we have been, and that stood out to me, honestly. Like, it doesn't feel like some teams in this league feel like we don't have enough or we can't compete with. everybody we've seen feels as though they're going to find their way to the college football playoff.
I think the quarterback position is always something that's easy to talk about. They get more blame and more praise maybe than they deserve, is the old adage. But when you look around the quarterbacks of the Big Ten, what
pleasantly
stands out
surprised.
Yeah.
Thank God. I mean, honestly, last year, calling a bunch of games, of course, in this league, at times that position was a little disappointing. I think looking into this year, oh my God, it's the absolute inverse of that. You have 5 of the 18 teams who are returning starting quarterback who had 5 or more starts. So we're talking about Luke Altmaier, Drew Aller and company, Ethan Kaliak-Manis, 5 of them. That means there's 13 teams that don't. But when you start looking at Billy Edwards going from Maryland to now Wisconsin. When you think of Julian Sand, another pure passer, now starting for the Ohio State Buckeyes. Dante Moore, as you referenced, not named the starter, at least in my eyes, he's definitely the starter. Right here at USC, Jane Mayava. I mean, what did he look like last year against A&M, which was pretty special in terms of how steady he was, to what he looked like this afternoon, totally different player. And I can go up and down the league, and I love that part of it, because that to me is what's going to allow so many of these tight games to go one way or the other. And I think they have premium. You got Fernando Mendoza going to Indiana. I mean, you look all across the league. Maryland, maybe they start a true freshman. We'll see how that thing shakes out. Michigan, of course, we're going there in a couple days. But net, Ash, 31 games last year in this league were decided by 1 score or less. I hope it's 41, 51. I hope every one, because it can come down to these much improved. I mean, even reference Dylan Raiola at Nebraska. I mean, you start just thinking about this league. It's a premium position, and I think this league, in, I'd say, the last 20 years, that's as far back as my mind will allow it to go, it's going to be the best quarterback play this league has seen.
I love that, and I hope you're right. I hope we get just nail-biter after nail-biter. I think from a big picture standpoint, I was going to ask you, who do you believe in most right now? But maybe I'll ask you a different version of that question, which is, who do you believe in most that maybe isn't one of those very top-tier teams that people are expecting to finish at the very top, that you think could break through and really make some noise and do some damage?
Yeah, that's a fun question, right? So if you're going to separate it, I think the deepest rosters in this league right now are the defending champs in Ohio State, defending league champs in Oregon, and the potential champs this year in Penn State. Those 3, from being at 2 of the 3 and hearing about what it was like in Columbus, I think the competitive depth, especially in the trenches, is just different. So among the rest of the teams in this league, of the 15, I got to lean to Illinois. I mean, that was really an impressive unit to go watch. Part of it is they're returning, depending on how you spin it, 16, 18 starters. And they practice like a veteran team, but most importantly, I got to go to a team meeting. Brett Bielema allowed us in there. And they didn't feel like a team who has all these expectations and they feel tight. And I learned that right here at USC from Pete Carroll. You want to compete freely at the end of the day. You want to work so hard that you earn the right. This is what he used to say, earn the right to compete freely. He'd say it right across the street in Heritage Hall. And those teams did that, the great teams here at SC. I felt that at Illinois. It didn't feel tight. It felt actually loose and welcoming. And I was like, all right, let's go. And what I love most about that is they go to Bloomington. That's going to be a blast going against a team that was in the playoffs. And they host this team right here at USC. 2 other teams that I would put right below if you were going to have that conversation of teams that you believe in that next group of teams.
Do you know what they say is that it's not how you start, it's how you finish? And I feel like your energy is just like, it's just going. And
you love it or you don't.
I love it. I freaking love it.
We had a great trip, too. It was a good 4 schools, a great fellowship. I mean, it was a blast.
The best fellowship that I could have imagined. Thank you so much. I don't know how you keep all that stuff in your brain, but I
can't remember anything else.
I know. Your wife said that, actually.
I know.
Kylan, back to you on that note.
See ya.
Ashley and Yogi, great stuff. I want to join this fellowship as well. All right, tonight the show is going on the road to East Lansing. The Michigan State Training Camp show gives you an inside look at the Spartans' preparations for the 2025 season. Dave Revson, Howard Griffith, and Jake Butt have sit-down interviews and exclusive insight. The Michigan State Training Camp show airs tonight at 11 p.m. Eastern. The Oregon Ducks are closing in on their season opener with a big question lingering about who will be under center. Redshirt sophomores Dante Moore and Austin Novosad have been in a heated competition for the starting QB job. While a starter has yet to be named, offensive coordinator Will Stein said this week that the competition is starting to shape out and the staff has a better idea of which direction they will go. For more on all things Ducks and that QB competition, we now welcome an Oregon beat reporter from the Oregonian, James Crepea. Appreciate you stopping by, my man. How's it hanging in the Pacific Northwest?
Doing well, and it certainly you can never take the weather for granted this time of year, but this is the time of year where it's awfully nice out here, so no complaints from Eugene.
We finally had the weather starting to cool off here in the Midwest, so we're on the same wavelength with that. Enjoy the fall weather. Before we get into that QB competition, you've been boots on the ground at Oregon's training camp. You've gotten to watch a couple of scrimmages. What are a couple of your big picture takeaways from what you've seen from the Ducks so far?
Yeah, so unfortunately, I wish we had more by way of true observations. But ultimately, this is set up to be exactly as you laid out. Look, these are two really talented young quarterbacks. We've gotten to see more previously, obviously during his time at UCLA. We got to see them both in limited capacity last season behind Dylan Gabriel. It would truly be surprising, just calling it what it is, if Dante Moore did not win this job. I mean, you just got to call it what it is. That does not mean that Austin Novosad isn't skilled. That doesn't mean that he couldn't lead this team. That doesn't mean that he doesn't have abilities. He was an Elite 11 finalist in his own right. But ultimately, Dante Moore is an extremely talented young man, and not to say that Austin isn't. But truth be told, it would truly be surprising if Dante Moore did not win this job. If you go back even to the spring game and what we did see, what we all got to see on a grander scale, look, he was just better that day. And that's not the only day that matters, certainly, but he has certain talents and abilities that Austin doesn't.
The average fan has not seen, as you pointed out, much of either Moore or Novosad. From what you've witnessed, what is it that gives Moore the edge in this QB competition?
I think they both have great touch, but Dante's got a combination of really some incredible arm talent and ability. It's just different, but arm talent, touch on the ball, ball placement, that we got to see, albeit in limited samples. You saw that previously, and frankly, you got to see that in the various highlight reels that they do put out from practice and some of those scrimmages. There's some really incredible throws in there. There really are. There was one in particular, a touchdown throw to Kenyon Sadiq in the back corner of the end zone that's just a really nice throw to make. So that's one of those things that some of those things can't be taught, and Dante's got quite a bit of them.
You brought up the things that can't be taught, and that's one thing that offensive coordinator Will Stein said about Moore is that he brings some of the leadership that Dylan Gabriel had on the field. He also said he has a blend of Bo Nix in him. Would you co-sign on that statement?
I'm not one of the people in the room, so I'd have to defer to Will on that one by way of exact personality traits and leadership capacity. But you certainly start to see some of that from Dante. Albeit, and yes, press conferences can be a bit performative at times, so you're trying to gauge off of limited samples and in these interactions that sometimes aren't necessarily natural. But what you do see, again, from some of the things behind the scenes, what you do pick up on by way of personality and when you're talking to people outside the interview room to other people in the room, per se, is, yes, that kind of those traits that, like Dylan, when Will was talking about things that Dylan does or did to bring people together, Dante did a lot of that. And has done a lot of that, not just during this fall camp, but going back to this summer. He had been at Manning Academy before. He did not go this summer. Austin did. And that's not because Dante wasn't invited. He went the year before with Dylan. But he made it a point this summer, and this isn't a knock on Austin by way of him having that opportunity. But Dante stuck around not go to Manning this summer so that he could work with receivers, work with the team more during the time of that weekend. They could say, well, what's the difference of a couple of days? But those are the kinds of things. Those are the kinds of things that show, to teammates in particular. Those are the kinds of hours that you spend where could have been doing something else, which was also an incredible opportunity had he taken it. But that's the kind of thing when you talk about leadership, when you talk about how you spend time outside of, and these things that we build up and tell stories about, that's one of those examples.
Whoever is starting under center, a big factor in whether or not they're successful is going to be the offensive line play. That's a unit that has been elite in the last couple of seasons, but they only return one starter, a lot of turnover like most of the roster. Still, what is your evaluation of the offensive line as we get closer to week one?
Yeah, on one hand, they only return the one starter, and that starter could be one of the best centers in the country in Pancho Laulu. So that helps. That's a good place to begin. And when you bring in several of the most prominent transfers at their respective positions. I mean, Emmanuel Pregnant from SC, one of the best guards, if not the best guard available in the portal, and probably an NFL-bound guard in that regard. Isaiah World, the top tackle available in the portal, and widely projected as a first-round draft pick, even with some physical questions because of his time at Nevada, to just see exactly how that translates, particularly against Big Ten edge rushers. So like I say, when you have a potential first-rounder at left tackle, when replacing a first-rounder at left tackle, one of the top interior linemen, if not the top interior guard available in the portal, one of the best centers in the country, that's a good place to start. And then Alex Harkey out of Texas State, by way of Colorado before that, also a really talented tackle, maybe the number 2 tackle available. So on one end, they're replacing 4 starters. On the other, they went and procured 3 of the most prominent transfers available. And they had a 4th from the year before, Matthew Bedford, who got hurt last year, but was set to be the starter last year. So really, they have 4 transfers. It's just one is on a year lag. And the one who's returning the starter is, like we mentioned, one of the best centers in the country in Pancho Laulu. So yes, they're replacing that. At the same time, they're replacing it with a whole lot of experience, just not experience here at Oregon or experience having played together.
The staff certainly did as good of a job as they could as getting some equivalent replacements from the portal. But with transfer portal guys, it's still not 100% guarantee that they're going to fit in with the system or be exactly what you think they're going to be. So we'll have to keep an eye on that as the season progresses. I also want to touch on the skill players, the wide receiving core in particular. You wrote a couple of articles recently about some of the options that they have right now. There's been some doubt cast on this group with top returner Evan Stewart going out with an injury. Do you believe this wide receiving core can compete with the best in the country?
They're going to have to. If this team is going to achieve what they want, if this team is going to be not just in the top 10 to start the season, but if they're going to go in, I mean, just call it what it is. They're going to have their biggest games and their biggest moments. If you're going to go into Happy Valley and win, somebody's going to have to catch the football. And look, there are legitimate questions. These are real questions. Not just because Evan Stewart got hurt. Even if Evan Stewart were healthy, there would be questions of this receiving core. They did not go out and procure a lot of talent there, particularly in the transfer portal. Yes, you bring in Torian Moore, who this fan base has probably the most outsized expectations of any freshman ever in the program, and certainly at the receiver position. Even if he were to deliver at the levels of a Jeremiah Smith or a Ryan Williams like they did a year ago as true freshmen, even if he were to produce record-setting numbers, someone else still has to catch the football, particularly at the receiver position. And even if Kenyon Sadiq becomes a 1,000-yard receiver at the tight end position, that's still only two guys. And yes, they do have some guys with some experience, like a Gary Bryant Jr., who you mentioned I wrote some things about recently, or Malik Benson, who they brought in. That was the one transfer they did bring in. But at the same time, there are questions. There are questions about durability. There are questions about catchability of those two young men in particular. And, yes, they do have some other talented players, don't get me wrong, but none of them are proven. None. So there are very legitimate questions of this receiving core, like I say, and that would be true even if Evan Stewart were healthy, and he's not. So bottom line is, to your question, can this receiving core compete with the very best in the country? That is something they're going to have to go out and prove. This isn't going to be about star rankings and, they were all blue chip players, some of these young players in particular, from years ago. If they're going to go up against the very best and not just compete for a Big Ten championship again, but get to a playoff and do damage, they're going to have to prove that over the next 3 to 4 months. That's not something that anybody can proclaim with certainty at this point.
James, shifting gears to the schedule really quick, there's no doubt a lot of people have Penn State in Week 5 circled on the calendar. Are there any other matchups on this schedule that really intrigue you for the Ducks?
There are a couple. I think the road trip to Iowa certainly is a quite a big one, as it is for most anybody who goes into Kinnick. But that's one specifically that I think sets up where it places on the calendar is one that stands out. And then the two home games to me that stand out are ones, to me, I don't want to say sneaky exactly, but I think people are overlooking it, relatively speaking, particularly on Oregon's schedule, is Indiana. I mean, look, if Oregon goes into Penn State and wins, there's a lot that could be riding on that for both teams. That's setting up to potentially be a clash of unbeatens in Happy Valley. And then Oregon come out of a bye week and have Indiana, and that very well may be a matchup of unbeatens at that point. For that matter, if Oregon were to lose at Penn State, come off a bye week, and then if Indiana is either undefeated or a one-loss team, that is also still a really pivotal game for both teams. And then, of course, later in the season, anytime Oregon and SC get together for what's shaping up to, I imagine, I'm not going to speak for television partners at this point, but I imagine that Oregon SC would be awfully attractive to any number of the broadcast windows, particularly in the evening, as that one sets up in November before, of course, the trip to Washington.
Gotta love a West Coast clash. James Crepea of the Oregonian, thanks so much for stopping by. Really appreciate the time, my friend.
Thank you.
Or serve, she scores! This is a wonder strike.
Not gonna be denied. It is quite the goal right there.
An opportunity, Michigan goal!
Here's a shot from Serta. Oh yeah, in the back of the net for Sarah Serta. Picture perfect over the outstretched arm.
Rudney with the shot and she scores!
Already pressing it forward is J.D. Holderreed, who has a shot on goal and sails to the right side. Solo strike, it was a beauty.
And inside, Brian, able to score.
Beautiful crossing header to drill it in.
McIntyre's touch is a good one too, and she's in and she buries it! She had ahead of Steve and she lashed that into the far corner.
feeding it to Samia Shell, who has a little shot and an opening that hits the back of the net. Washington drawing first blood.
Schluter with the ball, she has a breakaway, goes into the net.
On the attack, in the box, turning, firing. Are you kidding me?
So many awesome plays. Shout out to the students as well for the great calls. Tonight, a women's soccer top 10 showdown is coming your way. The 9th-ranked Iowa Hawkeyes host the 7th-ranked TCU Horned Frogs. Kickoff is set for 8:30 p.m. Eastern right here on the Big Ten Network. In some other news, the University of Michigan announced that legendary former softball coach Carol Hutchins is a part of the 2025 Hall of Honor class. Hutchins is the winningest coach in NCAA softball history with more than 1,700, that's right, 1,700 career wins. She led Michigan to the 2005 National Championship and was an 18-time Big Ten Coach of the Year. Hutchins retired in 2022. Thanks so much for stopping by this edition of Big Ten Today. I'm Kyla Mills. Don't forget, I got to hype up our soccer teams. We got a soccer doubleheader coming your way tonight, starting with the men in action at Providence at Rutgers, and then the women, Iowa hosting TCU in a top 10 showdown you do not want to miss. And then we've got a training camp show coming your way from East Lansing. A lot to look forward to this evening, so we hope to see you there. Have a great rest of your day. Appreciate you stopping by Big Ten Today.